Hola, otra vez. Okay, so again, I apologize for the poor quality of my videos, but I am doing what I can. So anyway, what we're going to do is I'm going to go over the verbs tener and venir. Now, these are two verbs that are very common in Spanish, just like they are in English. Tener is to have, venir is to come. Okay, so they are ER and IR verbs, but they are slightly irregular, okay? So what I call these verbs, typically I call them the boot verbs, or you can call them just radical change verbs. But I call them the boot verbs just because that's how I learned it many, many years ago. And basically that just means that if you conjugate these verbs out, typically like we do, so yo tengo, tú tienes, él, ella, usted, tiene, nosotros tenemos, ellos, ustedes tienen. Okay? Now, the reason I conjugated it out like this with the singular forms here and the plural forms here is because we draw that boot, okay? And everything inside that boot, essentially every form except for the nosotros form, is irregular, okay? Here, tengo, okay? It has a G there, all right? It's just for pronunciation purposes. Tienes, okay? Tienen, okay? This right here is just a stem changing verb. That's all it is, okay? There are several stem changing verbs. That's primarily what we learn in chapter 4, but these are the first two that we're going to learn here in this chapter. So tener means to have. We use it when we talk about age in Spanish. So I would say, yo tengo 44 años, okay? But I can also say, yo tengo 3 perros. Yo tengo un gato. Yo tengo muchos estudiantes. Pero nosotros no tenemos clase, okay? So I hope this helps you understand how we get those conjugations. So again, tener is your infinitive, okay? It is an ER verb, but it is an E to IE, meaning that E to IE has that stem change right here. The E in the stem changes to an IE in these irregular forms. It's just something that you have to memorize, okay? Tener, tengo, tienes. Notice how you pronounce it. The I and the E are both pronounced. Tienes, tiene, tenemos, tienen. Okay? All right. Now, we teach tener and venir together because they're both irregular in the exact same ways. Okay? So, I'm going to draw that boot again. Okay? So we have venir, which means to come, like I come from Indiana. Yo vengo de Indiana, okay? Vengo. Notice it has that G. And then it also has that E to IE stem change. So vienes, viene, venimos. Okay, notice the only reason it was tenemos because it's an ER verb. Here's an IR verb. Your endings are exactly the same, okay? So vengo, vienes, there's your irregular stem change. Viene, venimos, vienen, okay? Here's your irregular stem change. But notice this right here, your endings on these verbs are exactly the same as they were with your regular ER and IR verbs. There's not one single difference, okay? So, anyway, you have to look at your context in order to decide, do you use tener or venir, okay? Now, the one other thing I want to go over with these verbs are these tener expressions, okay? So, in English, we have a lot of expressions like it's hot, it's cold, you're lucky, things like that. But in Spanish, you have to use the verb tener. So rather than I am cold, you would say tengo frío. Okay? So I have cold, okay? These are those expressions on page 93, 94 in your book, and you just have to memorize them, okay? So you have tener frío, tener calor, tener suerte, and so all of these are just expressions. So if you're going to say that you and I are cold, then we would say, okay, nosotros tenemos frío, okay? So this word right here doesn't change. Only your verb form changes depending upon your subject, okay? So this stays the same, all right? Now, the last two expressions that I want to go over, these are a little trickier, okay? So these are your obligations, okay? Obligaciones, ¿sí? Contra deseos. Okay, so these are your obligations versus your desires, okay? So a lot of us have things we want to do, but then we also have obligations, right? So I'm going to start with my obligations, right? I have to work, right? Because we all got to pay our bills. So, yo tengo que trabajar. Okay, so notice I conjugate the form of the verb tener plus que plus an infinitive because I have to work. Okay, I have to take care of my kids, right? So I would say yo tengo que cuidar a mis hijos. Okay, I have to take care of or to care for my kids. So you have your conjugated form of the verb tener plus que plus cuidar. If you remember that old mathematical formula, a squared plus b squared equals c squared, that Pythagorean theorem, right? If you take b squared out, you don't get c squared. It's incorrect, right? Same thing with these, okay? So I don't know if you guys are math people or what, but I'm trying to show you that it's a little formulaic. You have to have the conjugated form of the verb tener, you have to have que, and then you have to have an infinitive to represent whatever your obligation might be, okay? So if I want to say that my students have to study and my students have to complete their homework, then I would say mis estudiantes. Okay, now think about it. I'm talking mis estudiantes. What is the verb form of tener going to be that would connect to mis estudiantes? Okay, so it's more than one student, but I'm not including myself in that. So mis estudiantes tienen, so notice conjugated form of the verb tener that corresponds correctly to the subject, plus que estudiar. And this is our infinitive. Okay? Mis estudiantes tienen que estudiar. Okay? I want to say you guys need to finish your homework. Okay? Ustedes. Okay, so my students, or I can say you all, ustedes tienen que terminar la tarea. Okay, conjugated form of the verb tener plus que plus an infinitive. All right, so those are your obligations, things you have to do. My students have to study. You guys have to finish your homework. All right? Now, your desires, los deseos, are essentially the same. It's just a longer formula, essentially. So it's tener plus ganas de plus your infinitive. Okay, so if I want to say one of my desires is to let's see. My desire is to leave my house, right? Because we've been here for so long. So I would say, yo tengo ganas de salir de la casa. Okay, so I have a desire to leave my house. Okay, tengo ganas de salir de la casa. Okay, notice I've conjugated the form of the verb to correspond to my subject. Ganas de, that's part of your formula. Notice nothing changed here, plus whatever your infinitive is. If you want to win the lottery, right? We all do, right? So we would say, nosotros tenemos ganas de ganar la lotería, right? So ganar is to win, which sort of, it comes from the same root word, which is ganas, okay? Or desires, right? So the verb tener is conjugated for nosotros, okay? And then this part right here does not change. It's just part of your formula. Nosotros tenemos ganas de ganar la lotería, okay? So that right there, those are your tener expressions and the verbs tener and venir. Remember, they are irregular. Practice writing out those conjugations, and that'll help you. And also in chapter 4, all of the verbs that we're going to work with are very, very similar to tener and venir, so you're going to get a head start on chapter 4, okay? You guys let me know if you have any questions. Our test over chapter 3 is next week, so you have one more week to get any of your questions answered, all right? Okay, I hope this helps. Okay, adios, hasta luego.